Hey, everybody. Welcome to our first online church experience. This is going to be a little awkward for me because I'm just talking to a screen. So bear with me and give me a little bit of grace, please, as we go through this sermon. This one will be probably a little bit shorter than normal. Had a little bit of technical stuff to work through this week, to say the least. So if you could just give me a little bit of grace, and we'll work through this the best we can. Thank you. This is going to wrap us up for the book of Joshua. This is our final look at Joshua in this series. I've titled this "Set in Stone," and you'll see most of my illustrations and everything this week are going to be related to rocks or mountains or something that a lot of times seem immovable and seem like they're set in stone. So we're going to take a look at that this week. If you're looking for something to do this week, let me recommend a book for you. It's called Canoeing the Mountains by Todd Bolsinger. It's been a few years since I've read the book, but essentially what he talks about is the Lewis and Clark expedition. Basically, they set out from Missouri and go up the Missouri River, and then they get blocked by the Rocky Mountains. So they're expecting to be able to basically canoe up the Missouri River, maybe cross a mountain or two, and then canoe down the other side to find the ocean. Well, as you know, that if you've ever been out west, the Rocky Mountains are a pretty formidable obstacle. If you look, there's just miles and miles upon miles of mountains, and once you get in there, quite easily you can get lost and stumble around. And I think that's a pretty apt illustration for where we're at today as a nation, as a church. We expected one thing, maybe even expected it to be pretty easy. And then all of a sudden we've hit this mountain of we can't go anywhere. We're kind of stuck. So I want to encourage you this week to think about, as what does being a church mean? What does that really entail? A few of the things that we've always thought church was, we've always assumed it was a building and a place that we go to worship, maybe even a service. That's how we spend our Sunday mornings or our Tuesdays or Thursday nights when we go to Bible study or Bible group. And this is kind of forcing us to remember that the church is more than just a building or a set of services or things that we go and do. And we have to remember that we are the church. And no matter what obstacles that get set in front of us, we can overcome those through Jesus. If you recall back to that story of Lewis and Clark, they had a Native American guide with them named Sacagawea. Sacagawea was able to go with them and essentially tell the natives that were with them, that they were meeting, tell them their story and act as an interpreter and a guide. They had never been to this land and they didn't know where to go. Not only did they not know where to go, they didn't know what to expect when they got there. Thomas Jefferson fully expected them to report that they had found woolly mammoths or even dinosaurs. So they really had no clue what to expect. So they get up to the first set of mountains, and they take their canoes with them and decide, well, we'll get over this mountain and then go to the next mountain and keep going. It doesn't take too long to realize that you can't carry a canoe for miles and miles in the mountains. You're just going to wear yourself out. And I think that's where we're at currently is how do we get past this fear and frustration of being stuck and being blocked by a virus and all these things that are quite frankly quite scary. If we're not placing our faith in God, it's really a terrifying time. I went to Walmart the other night and I looked around and there was nobody talking. There was no interaction. It was everybody was face down, looking to get whatever they needed and to get out. As I checked out, it was one of the busiest times I'd ever been in Walmart. But all I heard was the scan and the scanning of items being scanned and put away in carts. I didn't hear anybody talking. Yeah, even in the midst of everything that's going on, all of the fear and the terror that's out in the world, we don't have to worry. We don't have to be that concerned about it. We know that we can put our hope and our faith in Christ, and He's going to get us through it. He's going to see us through, as we've learned in the book of Joshua. That God said He was going to be with Joshua, and that promise is still there for us each and every day. No matter what we see going on in the world, God is still our guide. God is still guiding us and leading us through these things, and He's going to be right there beside us. So our response is completely different to everything that's going on right now. And sometimes we need to be reminded that, just like Paul told Timothy, that we are not given a spirit of fear, but of power and self control. And we need to take that self control and show others what it means to not live in fear, to not be doubtful, and to live by faith, to live knowing that our future is secure, that we don't have to worry, we don't have to be afraid, we don't have to doubt, that we know God is in control and He's taking care of us. So let's tie this all back together to Joshua. The Israelites had gone through difficult times, times where they had seen God move, and times they had seen the people doubted, and they'd been through trouble and hardship, and they had a choice to make. They could continue serving God, or they could serve something else. And that's that same choice that we are faced with every day. In Joshua's time, the Israelites could have chosen to worship idols. So an idol was something that was made out of the household money that they had saved back some gold or some silver for a rainy day. It was kind of the rainy day fund. And then they took that rainy day fund and made it an idol and prayed to it. Listen to these words from Isaiah chapter 44, verses 9 and 10. All who make idols are nothing, and the things they treasure are worthless. Those who speak up for them are blind, they are ignorant to their own shame. Who casts a god and casts an idol, which can profit nothing? Now, to bring this back to Joshua, if you recall over our previous studies, one of the reasons the people were being evicted from the land was that they worshipped idols. And that's something that God just could not have. He wanted all of the worship to Himself. In fact, in the Ten Commandments, He says, I am a jealous God. He's a God that wants all of our devotion. He wants us fully committed to Him. And so we're going to see that as we read through. What should our response be to God? Is it one where we should serve Him, or should we serve something else? And that's that decision that Joshua is going to lay out for us. So Joshua gathers all of Israel together at Shechem. I think I'm saying that right. Anyway, he gathers everybody together to recommit, to redevote themselves to God. And he asks them this question. Starting in verse 13, he says, So I gave you a land on which you did not toil, and cities you did not build, and you live in them, and eat from vineyards and olive groves that you did not plant. Now fear the Lord and serve Him with all faithfulness. Throw away the gods your ancestors worshipped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. But if serving the Lord seems undesirable to you, then choose for yourself this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your ancestors served beyond the Euphrates, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So Joshua is reminding the people of everything that God had taken them through. They've been at rest for many years now. They've been established in new homes, places that they didn't plant. Are now giving them food and taking care of them. You see that with the olive groves and the vineyards. But God has provided for this people, and Joshua wants to remind them of that provision that God has taken care of them. So he makes them recall everything that God has done for them in the last the entire history of Israel, the entire history, all the way going back, all the way to Adam and Eve, basically. And he tells them of everything that God has done and reminds them that they need to follow. And not only do they need to follow, they need to remember the consequences that are going to happen if they don't follow. They had seen a generation of people that were wiped out because they refused to follow. So now Joshua is asking them, do you really believe this? Do you really know what you're doing? Do you really want to follow God? The people think about it and they say yes, respond overwhelmingly yes. So they establish a rock. They put a rock up. Now, we don't really think anything of those. I've actually got a picture here in the background. If you're driving around through Moscow, right across from our church, you'll see an old boundary marker. Rumor has it that was the original boundary marker that they used to lay out the entire town of Moscow. They started from this boundary marker and worked their way out. Now, so they established a monument, a marker, remembering the covenant that they had established with God, that God had established with them. So if they're walking by, say a father and his children are walking by, the children would ask, "Hey, Dad, what's that marker for?" That dad could say, "Well, that was the time that we met as a people, and we said we're going to take a stand and we're going to follow God." That marker would stand the test of time. That it was set in stone that we were going to follow God. And we need to set those boundaries up in our own life. That there's things that we're going to follow God no matter what. And that's a marker in our own life. Now, Joshua was given that terrific opportunity to lead God's people, to show them how to live and why. If you look back to chapter 19 of Joshua, it talks about all of the divisions of land being given out. And if you read toward the end of the chapter, it talks about Joshua being the very last person to get his land. Now, you could say, well, Joshua is just saving the best for last. But I don't think that was the case. I think that Joshua truly had the people of God in mind, and he put himself last because he wanted to give the best to the people. Now, we need to take that to our own lives and apply that. We need to be putting God first and to put ourselves last, just like Joshua did. Now, I want you to think back of what we said Joshua's name meant. Joshua means redeemer or deliverer of his people. So Joshua was to set his people up in the promised land. And now his mission is done. So we're going to fast forward just a couple years, a few generations here, and think about Jesus and what his mission was. Well, his mission was to set free his people and to give them a new deliverance and a new land. Think back to the disciples. How much misery and sorrow must they have felt when Jesus was crucified? You know, they had followed this guy for 3 years, and they believed that he truly was God. Yet that was wiped away, or so they thought, when he was crucified. You know, they had followed him for 3 years, only to be let down. And they didn't really believe that he was going to be resurrected. Now let me read for you from Luke 24 here. It says, "On the first day of the week, very early in the morning, the women took the spices they had prepared and went to the tomb. They found the stone rolled away from the tomb, but when they entered, they did not find the body of the Lord Jesus. While they were wondering about this, suddenly 2 men in clothes that gleamed like lightning stood beside them. In their fright, the women bowed down with their faces to the ground, but the men said to them, "Why do you look for the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen." You know, right in the midst of uncertainty and doubt and fear, that's right where God shows up. That's always where God shows up. In our hurt, in our hardships, in our times of trial and tribulation, God always shows up. He's always there right when we need him. And when we fear and we doubt, we see that stone that it can only mean death and destruction. God is right there to roll away that stone. Now, for us as Christians, that stone that was rolled away is a reminder that God can overcome anything, that we don't have to fear anything because Jesus has overcome everything. Jesus has made us more than conquerors. We are no longer constrained by the world, but we have something to look forward to, that we can put our hope and our trust in him. As Peter says, we are now the stones that have been put together to make a living church. And church, we need to be alive. We need to know that no matter what, we can put our hope and our trust in him, that we are no longer bound in fear, bound by darkness. No, we are resurrected because Jesus was resurrected. Now, if you don't have that hope and that peace that passes all understanding, that you're still afraid, take that to God. If you don't know what to do, give me a call this week. I'd love to sit down with you and make sure that you understand that you can have peace and hope, even in times such as this, that today is a day of salvation, that you can put your hope and your trust in God today, even today. I invite you to come to worship at the feet of Jesus, at the feet of the cross. We're not going to be able to stand and sing together, but I invite you to make that decision, to make Jesus your Lord today as we sing. Come to the altar.